Yeah, we're live. It's 6:26. How's everybody doing tonight? We're a little early, which is good because a lot of times we run over anyways because a little bit of extra time. So hopefully everybody's doing good. I got quite a few things to talk about for tonight. One of them is I have intake manifolds for sale. I found a bunch, not a bunch, some when I was going through and getting all my stuff from West Tech, cleaning it all up, going through my storage area. I have and put together a pretty cool, I mean, a really cool, if this is the kind of combination that somebody wants. But I have for both guys, rec port guys and cathedral port guys, I have single plane intake manifolds. The rec port is an Edelbrock Victor Jr. intake manifold for rec port stuff. So if somebody's interested in that. The other one that I have is the Holley split port manifold or a split manifold. It's dividable. It is a cathedral port. It's also set up for EFI. So you could run it. The reason I like getting those is because you can run it both as a carburetor because it's a carburetor flange. You just have to plug the holes for the injectors, or you can run it EFI like with a 4150 or an elbow, front mounted LS throttle body. All of that stuff works really good. You can do it either way. That's a very good cathedral port intake manifold. The split port is much better than the just like as cast pieces. So that's a good piece. I have that intake manifold available. We ran dyno testing on it, and it's available now if you guys want it. And so send me an email. I'll put my email address up, and it's also in the description of the video. But in addition to that, if you want to go nuts with it, I can put a package together because I have the intake manifold comes with the fuel rails. And then I also have injectors. So I have a set of 80-pound injectors. I also have the 90-degree cast elbow. I also have a 105 millimeter throttle body. So you could put together the whole induction package if you wanted to do that. That's not cheap. The intake manifold, I think, is what are they from? They're like 650 or something like that from Summit. I would probably let the intake manifold go for like, I don't know, 425 or something. It's like an as new shape because all we did was run it on the dyno and then take it back off. The other thing is all of the other stuff is in equally good shape. The elbow, the 105 millimeter throttle body, injectors, all of that stuff is in perfect shape. If you were to get all of that stuff through Summit or Jags, I just went in and roughly priced it. I hardly ever do this stuff because I don't usually put that in my videos. I think that I should be doing this. I think it would be good for guys, and I think I tried it a couple of times. It's just there's a lot of it's very time consuming, but I should do it. But that stuff would be like when I costed it out, it was like $2,250. So it's a couple grand, which to me seems like a lot, but when you add up all the things, it is a lot. For me, looking at that, I might opt to go to, I'm thinking that or turbo. That's kind of the way, cheap turbo. Although, realistically, we buy a turbo for a few hundred, 500, 600, whatever the money is. That's just the start of you spending stuff. It's intercooler and tubing, exhaust manifolds, and all that stuff. So it's not as cheap as everybody lets on. I have a video up where it's here, look, we made all this power for $163 turbo. But the turbo wasn't the only thing that we would have to spend money on. So, but that's available. And then, so I think, I could probably save you like, $500-600 off of that if you wanted to do that. If you wanted a whole package, it's like it would be kind of ready to go. Just, put it on whatever thing. But make sure that if you're thinking about that you have the rest of the combination to go along with that. So that would be good for, I guess you could do it with a high RPM 4.8 or 5.3. You could try it with that. A 6.0, a stroker 6.0, like a 408, all that's good. The 6.2 stuff, if you have cathedral port heads on your 6.2, like you got a good set of airflow research heads maybe on there, like 225, 235, 245, something like that. All that would be good. But that sort of intake manifold, as cool as it looks, two things that I want to talk about is one, it's a fairly high rise intake manifold, and then the elbow makes it even higher. So make sure that you would have hood clearance for something like that. and then also, like I said, if you're going to run that, you don't really necessarily want to run that with one of my low buck truck camshafts, which we're going to be talking about again in a minute. But you would want to make that on a combination where you're running it to 7,000 or something. So you want to have enough camshaft and enough head flow to go along with what that induction system could support, because it could support, quite a bit on a cathedral port stuff. If you guys will remember, that's the manifold that I did the Super Richie modification to, because it bolts together basically and has a sealing deal there. I think it's an O-ring. But because it seals together like that, we took it apart. And what I did is I made it a divided manifold. So I didn't make it a dual plane. We just made it a divided single plane, and it was terrible. I'm like, yeah, look, I'm going to make a super custom Richie manifold, and it's going to make all the low speed power of a dual plane and then all the top end of the big, of the single plane. And it didn't do either one of those. It just was terrible everywhere. So putting a divider in there, not good. I could have tried more things like another spacer on top, and we could have played with that a little bit. More just to see if we ever could have gotten back to where the manifold that did very well by itself, if we could have ever got back to that with some kind of divider in there. Maybe if the divider down there was like this small or something, maybe it would have done that. But I don't think it would have. So it was an interesting idea, a gee whiz kind of thing. And it was exactly that. It was not a top secret, hey, let's make all kinds of power. But it was good. And so that manifold's available. Also, the Edelbrock single plane manifold is available. So if you guys are interested in that, send me an email. I'll put the email up here every couple of times. Like to see it go to a good home and have somebody send me pictures or whatever of their cool car that ran it, whatever. That'd be awesome. So that's available. Those two things are available. Other thing is, at the end of this month, starting in we're in October now, right? So after Halloween, the price on the low buck truck and the Truck Plus camshafts is going up. It's not going to be $179 shipped anymore. It's going to be $179 plus shipping. So the shipping is a lot. So I mean, I get a really good deal on shipping, but as a percentage of what the minimal amount of money that I would make on a camshaft, it's a lot. So I'm having to change that. So that will happen starting in November and going forward. So if you guys are anybody's thinking about getting one of the low buck truck camshafts, would work awesome. I have videos up on 5 liter or 5.3 stuff and 6 liter and turbo stuff. And, it works with all of this stuff. So I have stuff on those. So if you're interested in one of those in the $179 $179 cams, you get your order in October, because they're going to go up. It's still $179, but plus shipping. I'm also, Jimmy and I are working on the store, so I'm hoping to have that up this month. So it won't just be me and PayPal. It will be, you'll have a place to go to and you can order it and all that stuff. It'll be a little bit more legit, let's say. Not that it's not legit. I'm sending them all out. It's just me working out of my garage, basically. So that's happening also. The other thing that's happening, and this is going to be our poll today, is the poll is going to be, you'll remember back when I came out with when we first introduced the t-shirts, it's not the other guys, but the hashtag wrong cam shirts. So I got another order of those that should be here anytime now. So before we raise the price in November, should I do another deal with the t-shirts? So that will be our poll. T-shirt. Okay, should I offer the $199 cam and t-shirt special again in November? So let me know. We did that before. It seemed to be very popular. Guys loved getting, shirts with their cams and stuff. So let me know if we should continue with that. Let's see. This is going to be October. not November. And this time when I got the t-shirts, I got twice as many. So I have, and then I heavied up on the sizes that were the most popular from the previous, because that's how we learn. We adapt, improvise, overcome. That's how we learn. And so, not a lot of smalls, and I still have 3X stuff left over from the previous order. Not a lot, but some. So I went heavy on the in-between sizes, large, extra large, and 2X. And those seem to be the most popular ones. And I got blue and red again. So we'll be able to offer both of them. And you guys let me know if that's something that we should do. So we got the shirts, we got the intake manifolds, we got the store, we got the cam pricing. So all that stuff's going to happen. Also, I was talking to Freiberger, and we were actually talking about one of the things that we were talking about was the 4.3 liter V6, because he said, I think he's run that smoky manifold before. And he said the one thing that he thought that it needed, and I can't remember if he said that he tested it or not, but it should have wanted a spacer between the lid and the thing. And I said, yeah, we're going to do that anyway, because I was going to do that for the blower setup that we want to do. And he said that the centerpiece is really that's missing on the one that I have is just like a ski jump. He said it's just a triangular, piece of I don't know, remember if it was aluminum or sheet metal or something. He said, but yeah, it's not very intricate. So, and I'd kind of be curious to see how far it went up toward the carburetor. Did it actually divide the two sets of barrels, the two openings, or was it down below that? So it would be more like a different kind of spacer, let's say. So that would be cool. But I wanted to raise that up anyway, and spacers for that would actually be fairly easy. Maybe I'll hit up Tom Demuse Engineering and see if he wants to get involved in something like that. So that will be interesting. So let's see what you guys got going on. We got our poll up. We went through all of our stuff. Our stuff is our stuff. Anything for an LQ4? Yeah, these intake manifolds I have are for an LQ4 with rec port heads. Also, if you're talking about camshafts, I have two very good camshafts, particularly for like drivers. I mean, they offer 60, 70 horsepower gain, so they offer a lot of performance, but they're more oriented toward the driver side of the thing, and they're not 230, 235 cam. So, all the power on the big end. Australia's in the house. How much for the throttle body? I'm not really separating that stuff. Assuming it would not be an upgrade for my LS7 fast. Not since it's a cathedral port. It's not going to bolt very well to your heads. And the post piston motor, have I heard anything about it? I don't think I have. Where I'm in California, Cadillac. I hope that your name is Chad and that you have a Cadillac. That's cool like that. Kyle, what's going on? Hopefully not too many of us on here pay retail very often. More often than I'd like. I need to start playing with more normal engines. 408 rec port, Summit Stage 2 cam, Stage 2 turbo cam is HD 8082 Forge Performance. Turbo good choice for as far as back pressure. I don't know about that particular turbo. I'd have to look it up and see. I have a similar setup, a billet plate that puts 8 more injectors between the elbow and the manifold. Okay. 16,225 for methanol. What do you think about Brian Tooley's comments recently about those intakes? About which intakes? About single planes? Getaway, what's going on? What size turbo smart wastegates for 1,000 horsepower? We run twin 45s on all the stuff that I do. And I run twins even on the single turbo stuff. The twin wastegates. Only because we have a harder time controlling it on the engine dyno than you do out on the street. Wore my red hat, a red Ron Cam shirt to a meeting at work. I work in IT, so everyone was very confused. Yeah. I got a buddy of mine that I work with for quite a while. He's great. And somebody made him a shirt. His name's Jason. It said Jason sucks. And so he used to wear the shirt around. People are like, dude, who's Jason? He goes, I'm Jason. They're like, I don't get that. He said, you would if you were around me for a while. Actually, he's awesome. And has a very, very sharp mechanical engineering degree. And so he's good folk. Ran out of characters about the discrepancies in our fuel ratios compared to straight runner intakes like the equalizer or low ram, for example, under boost. And the discrepancies in air fuel ratio compared to straight runner intakes like the equalizer, I think I can tell you that Brian went to a lot of trouble with his intake manifold to equalize distribution, and they were looking at air fuel. I would have liked them to look also at, because they were under the assumption, and maybe this is correct, that if you have the same air fuel in the cylinders, that the flow and the boost are the same in the runners. They're equalized in the runners. What I would like to see, the data that I'd like to see in addition to that, is I'd like to see boost pressure readings in all the cylinders, or even better yet, in the port, in the head port, to see what's going on. Now they have they have cylinder pressure in all the cylinders now, so they're doing really good stuff, which would tell you, what that cylinder is doing. So that would be really interesting, and it would be very telling on like a single plane manifold where during the run, some of the cylinders are not making the same cylinder pressure because they're not making the same power curve, which is what we're talking about with cylinder pressure. So it'd be interesting. So he did go to great lengths to try to equalize the air fuel ratio in all the cylinders, and they did that. They did that very well with their short runner intake manifolds. Why don't they make what was that? ABS intakes for LSs that a carb would work on? All I see is aluminum. The guys at Westech have tested composite carbureted manifolds and did not see a big change in air temperature. So I don't know that that's a concern, as much of a concern as people think that it is. Full disclosure, I read the title interpreted as flat plane cranks for sale. S475 from Summit on the same setup. An S475, at least the one that's most common, is a T6. And the T6 S475 on 4.8, if you're looking for something like 1,000 horsepower or less, you're fine. You don't need to worry about back pressure. You're good. Doing all brakes tomorrow, drums, okay. 2005 to 13, 1500s had them, replacing parking cables. He was on the Go Hard podcast, I think, and he was talking about some crazy spreads between runners. There is. It's dramatic. I've run lots of testing on air. We've done some 802 readings in different manifolds, and I did it way back on single planes and dual planes as a blow-through carbureted deal, and I did it naturally aspirated and boosted to see if it changed anything. My concern on the carbureted deal, and now it makes me want to go back and look at the data and see, but my concern on the carbureted deal, when we look at the fuel flow through the secondaries on a typical, like on a blow-through carbureted deal, we always use Kevin from CSU's. We've used quick fuel stuff, but it's primarily Kevin's deal. And then so we use his bonnet on top of there, and it's aiming straight forward. So coming from a turbo or a blower, it goes straight in. And then which we read on the dyno, we have turbines on the fuel flow. So we know what the fuel usage is on the primary and secondary side of the carburetor. And when we're doing these things NA, we try to equalize that. We try to make them the same. When it's a blow-through application, we see a lot more fuel flow through the secondary side than we do through the primary side. And I think that that's the air stacking against the back wall and most of it going through the secondary side. That worries me because we run it a lot and Kevin's run them a bunch and we've run them a bunch and they've always worked. But looking at that, it's always made me wonder, do we have like the back 4 cylinders of a single plane or a dual plane, whatever the 4 it shows from those back holes? Do we have those, working more and then the others not? Like, are those getting more fuel and the others are lean and those are rich? Is that what's happening? So doing 802s kind of tell us that. And that's what Brian was doing with their EFI manifolds too. And the nice thing about an EFI deal, if you have sequential injection and you have a little bit of distribution, because I have a video up on this where we did this on a single plane intake manifold. We ran it carbureted because it had a carburetor flange on it. And we also ran it with batch fire and sequential, and then with individual cylinder tuning. And the manifold itself, even if you have port injection on it, the manifold itself wants different fuel flow during the RPM range for different cylinders, because you got 4 longs and 4 shorts, but even with that, you have variations. So for you to get exactly the same air fuel, you have to go in and trim each individual cylinder to do that. It didn't show a lot of power change, but it might be the difference between the motor working and not working all the time, basically breaking. In the process of putting an NA53 together, I have a set of 317 heads. We'll upgrade them with BTR goodies. Thought about having heads milled to up the compression. Yeah, you can mill them. I wouldn't go more than 30. After that, you tend to run into intake fitment problems with the bolts and stuff. Anyone have an experience with a Ford Escape? I don't think that I have. Is it a turbo motor? Let's see here. Scrolling. Here we go. 600 horsepower LS3. Would you choose Holley high ram or CID single plane with a 90? I don't know, honestly. The high ram works pretty good for if you have a big cam and imported heads, which I'm assuming that you have. The high ram should be able to get you there. I've never tried the CID single plane. I've tried other, like the mass single plane, and we've tried some of the other cast single planes. And the mass single plane was okay. I don't think it did what the Holley did though. What the high ram did. What are the specs for the cams you're selling? If you send me use the email that I put up there, I can send you the specs on both of them. But basically, one's a 212 and one's a 219. Friend of mine is thinking of a low mileage Escape bright red. Wait, what year is it? What motor is it? JMer. Thank you, Richard. That's exactly what I was wanting to know in regards to your opinion on single planes versus equal length runners. Yeah, having equal length runners, you would hope, and most of the OEM stuff is like this, as long as packaging allows, that they're trying to get all the cylinders to produce the same power curve. That way they could give it the same amount of fuel and stuff. And, everything works out good. Everyone's pulling their weight. Scrolling back. Oh, yeah. An S475 on a 6-liter works good. I was wondering about a 96 small block Chevy Vortec lower intake manifold. If you look at the 84 Crossfire lower intake, the 69 DZ 302, and the old Smoky unit, the 96 Plus Vortec just needs a top. Where are the injectors on that? I don't know. I had to have looked at the inside of one of those before. Chris, I wouldn't mind running either a higher volume or a higher pressure pump for the turbo stuff, especially if you're doing twins, just because you're going to need extra oil flow. you think that any single plane intake manifold would be better suited for an LS stroker than the Holley high ram? I don't know. All I can show you is the dyno results from all of the testing that I've done. And you can look at the high ram, excuse me, the high ram versus like on the LS3. It makes me wonder what the now let's go to the dyno results so that I can speak intelligently about this and not just from memory, because that's not as effective. Carbureted LS3 intake test. Yeah, that doesn't tell me anything. So the thing I want to look at is the Super Victor 4500. And then, did we have a high ram? Holley single plane. I might not have run the high ram on here. Holley single plane, Holley dual plane. Super Victor. It doesn't look like I did. The Super Victor is a lot better than the Trick Flow one, and a lot better than the GM one. Let me go back and I'll look at the EFI versions. Big EFI intake test. Tells me nothing. Edelbrock Super Victor. And then we'll take a look. This is on a 6.2. This is on an LS3. Holley Sniper. Holley high ram single throttle body. Yeah, they make the same peak power, the Super Victor did. The high ram had better power down low, well, up to 5,500, and then had another, like, I think that's, let me make sure. Yeah, and then had another little bulge from 5,900 to 6,500 or something. So the high ram was on the 6.2. The high ram was a little bit better than the Edelbrock Super Victor, and I don't know how the CID would compare to that. Brad, I'm getting down there. I'm not there yet though. I'd have a high performance oil pump. Do you have any data for a Summit 8712 R1? Tell me what the specs are on that cam. When you did the L33 with 799 heads on BTR hot rod cam, what push rod length did you use? I don't know. I have to go back and look. I think we had an aftermarket push rod in there, but I don't remember what it was. Steve Morse covered a 582 big block blow through carbureted CSU 4150. He built back in 2004, made 2,000 horsepower. Showed it's impossible to have exact dead air fuel on all 8 cylinders. Well, the thing that I would ask after reading that is what intake manifold did he use? Because the blow through and the carburetor, I don't think are the things that are limiting air fuel, because we saw a change in air fuel from port injection as well because of the manifold. The manifold is distributing the airflow and the power production in the cylinders unevenly during the RPM range. And so it has nothing to do with the carburetor not being able to do it. And because we did it did the same thing both ways. Not probably exactly the same, but it did have discrepancies in the air fuel distribution with both ways, which tells us that it's the intake manifold and not really the method of fuel delivery. The CID manifold will outperform all other manifolds. I think that's a that's a bold claim. Have you tested them on LS motors? You're mentioned by Brian Tooley in an interview that I saw on YouTube. Yeah, he did this big giant 5-hour thing. He said a couple of things I don't agree with, but Brian's my friend, man. So it's okay if we disagree. Isn't the Trailblazer SS intake one of the best LS intake manifolds? It's one of the best, probably the best factory cathedral port intake manifold, followed closely by the LS6. But it's not better than aftermarket intake manifolds. One of the several part comments. First things first, thank you for everything you do. Second thing is please test a quick spool valve if you do wind up turboing the 6 liter. A quick spool valve is not going to be a good thing to test on a stationary loaded dyno. We have an artificial load already present on the dyno. So a quick spool valve test would be much better on the street, or even on a chassis dyno, I think would be a better thing. After all your videos on big turbos and small turbos, twin turbos, the list goes on. One thing we don't have super Richie dyno data on is quick spool valves. Yeah, I don't. The engine dyno, like I said, the engine dyno, not probably a good application for a quick spool valve. I think that they're very cool, and I'd like to try one. It just would have to be done not on the engine dyno, I think. Yeah, Brad, it would be cool if we see that, because I have a big turbo from VS Racing. It would be cool to see if that turbo would spool up as good as a small turbo. But I don't know that we, like I said, on the engine dyno, I just don't know if we show that. I'm unaware if GM updated the Vortex spider injection by doing away with the poppet valves and used individual injectors in the spiders like they did with the Vortex. I think that they did do that later on the small block too, right? Does anybody know? Best of both worlds, street spool and quarter mile power are just a novelty. I think it's a real thing. I mean, I think a quick spool valve does what you're saying that it does and what they're saying that it does. Like I said, I don't know, because when we do a dyno load, what we do, whether it's a turbo motor, a blower motor, a NA motor, nitrous motor, whatever, we load it and then we choose the RPM that the dyno holds the motor at. So like, let's say we pick 3,000. I know everybody wants us to pick 800, but we pick 3,000. We run from 3,000 to 6,000 or 6,500. So we pick 3,000. So we go to wide open throttle. The dyno grabs onto it and won't let it rev at wide open throttle any more than 3,000 RPM. So you might imagine what that does. The turbo's like, oh yeah, this is perfect for us. We got all the spool time that we want. So in doing that, the turbo is artificially enhanced. Really, it's enhanced like the Marvel movies. It's enhanced already. And so we're giving it an advantage already just because of the way that the dyno works. So it would have to be way off its game in terms of spool to not spool there. Like we could maybe test it on a 4.8 or something, and maybe that would show better. But I'm all in. I think that's a good idea. I just wonder if we could do it on the chassis dyno. 96 up has plastic ejector lines close to the head. We've seen an electric drive turbo only on the internet. Can we get some more 351 Windsor content? I agree. I do want to do that. Pretty much out of everything but under the Mercury today. Its trans shifter is stiff. Also needs some bushings. The dyno results show the CID intake to be the very best LS intake manifold on 6 and 6.2 liters, almost 30 better. Almost 30 better than what? Are you going by their dyno results that I saw that they posted? So we don't want to give people false information, because I would I would doubt that single plane intake manifold is 30 better than the intake manifolds that I've already tried on a 6 or a 6.2, because I know what the discrepancy is between the different manifolds, between good ones and bad ones. And I'd like to see an intake manifold design that has another 30 on top of that. And so maybe I need to test one of those. Maybe it will show me. I don't recall the intake manifold that Steve used. Jerry, we spoke an email about the dual plane for Carb LS. Are you selling any single planes? I just got on the chat. Yeah, I announced that early on. I have the Holley split. Oh no, that's a single plane. I think that the dual plane is gone. Probably some Rays, high port, big block Chevy. Yeah, I would imagine. 2,000 horsepower is a lot. In a boosted LS platform, how do you go about tuning ignition timing, and what are safe wide open throttle ignition timing numbers for them? It depends on a great deal of things. It depends on what your head is, what your static compression is, what your temperature is, what fuel you're using. Is it intercooled? How much boost are you running? All of those things come into play. What's your favorite boost control? I don't really have a favorite one. The one that I've used more often than anything else is this old Turbo XS manual controller with a little Allen wrench bleed knob. Basically, that thing's been on, I'm sure, more turbo and blower motors. Well, probably not blower motors, more turbo motors than any other single wastegate controller in the history of the world. Because I've used it until I got a Turbo Smart one, that Turbo XS one. I've been using it since the Honda days, back with so back in the 90s. And it has a lot of different test motors and lots of runs. And for electronic controllers, we've used the TC1, which Westech had, and then Holley. And I don't know that I've ever gone to a 4-port. I've used 3-port stuff a lot on the dyno, but I've never used CO2. And whenever I reference it in the manifold. 1993 TBI 350 rated at 210 horsepower, 300 foot-pounds. The factory ratings are all speaker. They're all flywheel. None of them are at the wheels. Richard, with all the LS engines, I just scrolled. With all the LS engines you have cammed, do you still try to find bicycle on cam before tightening down the rockers? Do I find bicycle? What is that? Any blow-off valve recommendations? I use a Turbo Smart, and in fact, they give me a hard time about every time that I do it, because we have a Turbo Smart, an old style Turbo Smart raceport blow-off valve that I don't even think they sell it anymore. But I always use it because it's on a section of aluminum tubing that we use, that I try to integrate for all of the test things, and we just couple it together. And he's like, we don't make that anymore. We make a cool new smaller one that does what that one does. It's just a lot smaller, so it fits in a lot more places. But the Turbo Smart stuff works really good. Richard, will these free L82 heads be a wise upgrade on a factory 68307? No, an L82 head is going to be like an 882, right? That's not going to be a performance head. Your 68 head is probably already better than that. Although I just don't know about on the 307. I don't know what the chamber size is and stuff on that. Mount the boost controller on the steering wheel. That's right. So you can do push to pass. Then on the other side is the different stages of nitrous that you're doing, in case your passing maneuver is not going as planned. Using my old oxygen sensor wires to power my boost controller. Cool. Michael, you're a little late. I was working on a project car. That's a good excuse, though. You want to be getting stuff done. Thumper, you need LS cams for your truck? Do you need Pontiac stuff? CID intake is too much for your average 6-liter. I see. I would think that would be the case. I don't know how the. I'll have to talk to Brian. I think Brian has tested some CID stuff. I don't know if he's tested a Cathedral Port one, but I'll ask and see if they've run a CID one, because they run higher horsepower stuff. The boost control question, were you talking about the land speed Civic? We ran a manual boost controller on the Civic. I don't discount the engine dyno loading, spooling turbos, roll racing. I was always above the turbo light off RPM, full throttle, then pulled it back. Yeah, if you're doing roll racing, I wouldn't even be above like power braking. I decided to plumb the 454 engine, just like you on the dyno test. Dash 8 AN feed and return. Okay, that'll be good. I think he means base circle and making sure the lifter is on it before torquing the rockers. So what question was that? I'm scrolling back. Oh, was that Michael's comment? Yeah, when you put a camshaft in and tighten everything down and get it all set up, and then you put all your push rods in, and when you tighten your rockers down, there's lots of rockers you can just tighten down because those are on the base circle of the cam anyways. And then you tighten those down, and I tighten them down, and then if I get to one that wants to open the valve, so you'd have to tighten it down and compress the spring, we just rotate the motor. I always take the plugs out anyway so I can rotate it freely. And you just rotate the motor until that rocker will just fall down because you're back on the base circle of the cam, then tighten everything up. And then while I don't usually try to tighten them against the spring pressure. On some cylinder heads, that could pull the threads out of the head. So it's base circle and not bicycle? I was confused. I like that idea. One side for the nitrous to spool the turbo and the other side telling it how much boost to make. There you go. Didn't realize my typo. Yep. I love the Le Mans Supercharge. Get with you on the Pontiac stuff. Had to make 2 races in September. Finally got the test of 671. Did you guys run it? Did you guys run the blown 505? I want to know how it did. That's awesome. Do you suggest electric or mechanical water pumps on the 6-liter? I wouldn't. I don't know that I would run an electric water pump on the street. It was good to meet people. I put a rear sway bar on it last week and it lifted the front tires. You can't spin it freely with plugs in it, so there's not enough gap. That's how you know you have enough ring gap, right? Is because it just spins over freely. Is the only reason the 7875 will make more power than GT45 because of the compressor wheel. Yeah, it's a bigger turbo. Just got my daughter to bed, so late to the party. When you have shirts back in stock, they should be here sometime, I'm thinking the middle of next week or maybe sooner. They were already shipped. Ran 760s. Ooh, at 93. That's a really good ET for that mile an hour. So where are we at? Should I offer the 199 cam t-shirt special again in October? 94%. Way to go, guys. You 6%ers. So-and-sos. Scrolling. Have you ran twin GT45s on a 6-liter yet? No. I ran. Did we run? I think we ran twin GT45s on the big block, though. The GT45 is not physically larger than the S4 than the and the 7875. Okay, then not than an S475. That's what I thought we were talking about. And the 7875, like the Gen 2 7875 that I have, will certainly make a lot more power than a GT45 will. I'm just glad people are buying shirts. I've felt bad about badgering you to make shirts for so long that people weren't buying them and just sitting there on a stack of shirts. That's all good. I need new shirts, so. So you're running a single or dual plane on an EFI street driven 6.1. Is it a Hemi? If it's a Hemi, I wouldn't run the Mopar Performance single plane on that. It loses a lot of power. Any used big block aluminum heads you want to sell? I don't. I need to run the Big Bang motor. Then after that, there might be. I know that you and Engine Masters use CSU for the blow through. Do you send your carb to them or do they offer their own carb? I have a demon to blow through, but I only hear good things about CSU. We use that carburetor when we're testing at Westech because Westech has that carburetor. Kevin gave it to the guys at Westech a long time ago. And I just recently gave it back to him so that he could repair some threads and things like that. And just basically, put it back to spec. Kevin's a great guy, and we want him to do nothing but good things, and he does. He loves his product, and he does a good deal. That carburetor's worked a lot, and we have thousands of pulls on that thing, and it works really good. But it started out, I think, as a Holley 850 is what it was originally. I don't know about drivability though. I've never done that. I've never had that. Kevin swears to me that guys drive around on them and make power and do all that. We don't take it off of the dyno and go drive with it. Richard, it was 8th mile, 7.6, mid to high 11s. Yep. Really slow for a supercharged engine. I thought it was 760s in the quarter at 93. Shutting her off a little bit early there, right? I need something with a carb soon, so Chevy can quit telling my insurance what I'm doing. That's right. They can keep tabs on you. What makes you choose a cam for your camshaft videos? Well, I want to test all sorts of things. For LS motors, and really for a lot of these things, I pick camshafts that are popular. And I also pick camshafts that are within the range of primarily available piston to valve clearance, because there are big cams that we could put in. And sometimes we run bigger cams if I'm trying to make some specific power output. But if I test the range of cams from the smallest stock cam to the biggest cam that will fit in the available, factory piston to valve clearance, then we kind of know what all the things do in the middle. And then that's just good information. So the more cams I test, more information people have. That way they can make their choice on whatever cam they want. Live stream. Yeah, it's all just for information for people. People get confused about that a lot. They're like, "What? That thing doesn't make very much power." I'm like, "Well, the goal wasn't to make lots of power. That's not what every engine that we put on the dyno is not for that. it's an educational purpose thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't have run a stock cam in it if we were trying to make lots of power. But that's the starting point. And then we put another, like on the 408, we ran a stock cam and a 206 cam and like a 216 cam and a 224 cam and a 232 and a 239 or 240 and then a 246. And, you know, I did that so that people could see, oh, yeah, I like this curve, or I like this curve, or I like this curve, or I like this drivability. It's all good information. It's possible to make a group of cams that only vary one specific statistic. Yes, when I did the LSA thing, that was it was hard to do because of the way that they make cams. It's hard to make those specs on the same blank because there's only so much adjustability. So you can't get, you know, a 108. What do we get? A 108, 112, 116, and 120 LSA. And that's the only change I want. I want all the other things to be the same. But you have to specify what all the other things are, because if you change the LSA, you're going to change something else. It has to. It can't not. The lift could be the same, and the total duration could be the same, but you're definitely going to change the valve events when you do that. Did you work OS Tech? I did not. Just emailed you about the intakes. There's an LSA. Yeah, I did a video where we tested LSA on the camshafts. What's your opinion on new shear fabricated intake manifold lid? I don't know. I don't give opinions about stuff unless I've tested them. And so I would hope that they have dyno data on what it is. And a lot of these things, like the CID intake manifold, or, you know, some of these really high-end super billet manifolds or whatever, that, hey, we made this so it's super strong, so it'll withstand 60, 70, 100 pounds of boost or whatever. I don't need to test stuff like that because I don't have combinations that will take advantage of that. And quite honestly, the 5 people in the world that would be getting that manifold to run it at those levels, they could take advantage of that. This channel is not for those. It's just not dedicated to those guys. It's not going to give them any information. And the average guy's never going to put that on there. And you know, if he did, how much better than like if a fast was a whole bunch better in the RPM range that he's running? It doesn't look very well that this $6,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 manifold didn't do well against a typical fast because I ran it on a motor that a typical fast should be on and not that manifold. Have you done anything cool to my truck? It came with a muffler. It's all stock. It's 100% stock. It does have the knock sensors not working right now, so that's kind of cool. So it has like 6 or 8 degrees less timing than it should. What camshaft sounds the best? Have I Debo tested a motor? What camshaft sounds the best? Wholly subjective. Do you like a whisper smooth idle, like a stock one? Do you like all the chop? You know, what exhaust is it? All that stuff. Do you prefer cathedral port or square port? I don't have a preference. There's one's not better than the other. It depends on what you're trying to do. For me, truck, 2,000 to 4,000 RPM, stock motor, cathedral port. I'm not going to change that for a rec port. That wouldn't make any sense. So your truck is the opposite of my Corvette. The only non-stock thing you have is the only stock thing I have. Have you dyno tested an engine new and after, say, 100,000 miles? Yes. I haven't had a motor that long and then tested it. I did do a test on, I've done this several times. We've tested new versions, but a different motor of that same thing. So when we put motors on the dyno, like we put these 5.3s or 4.8s on the dyno, they make basically what they made when they were new. Some of them make less. Not all of them have been cared for the same way. But to give you an idea, I had a project Mustang that did a 98 Mustang that had, I don't know, 150 or 200,000 miles on it, let's say. It was a 4.6 2-valve non-PI motor. And the guys from Coast High Performance built me a new version of that motor. with forged rods and forged pistons in it because we were eventually going to run a Kenny Bell on it. But they built me that motor. And so we took my motor out. We ran my car on the chassis dyno, took that motor out, ran it on the engine dyno, did a bunch of stuff to it, put the new motor on the engine dyno, ran it stock, then did the same stuff to it, and then put it in the car and did that. And I was really disappointed in the amount of power gain that we got, which was almost nothing, going from basically the worn out, tired stock short block that was in the car, the original one, to this new one. There was like almost zero power gain. So it was very disappointing. Some of them, like, we have a range of, like, let's say, I don't know, I'm going to say 10 or 15 horsepower. Most of them are the same. We get a motor, we run it on the dyno on a 5.3, and it makes like 350. I've had some that make 340. Most of them are in the 350 range. I think you should do an MPG project with a truck. I do want to. In fact, when I was at MPMC, I got an electric water pump from Don and the guys at Mazir, which is awesome, and also an electric fan setup to replace the factory fans. I don't know that that's a good idea for cooling, but for fuel mileage, it probably would be. And since I wouldn't be doing this towing a load or anything. I would just be driving to and from West Tech. And I would like to see if I could get better fuel mileage with the electric fuel pump and with the electric fan setup, because I think it would. You plan on modifying the truck only as I just described. We have put some stuff on the chassis dyno while we had the truck down there. Like we put the M90 blower on there, but then I just took it off and put it back to stock. I promise the muffler is stock. It does have a muffler on it because people ask me that all the time. Well, what's in that thing? Like, it's got a muffler on it, but it was on it when I got it. It was on there when I got it. And somebody had hacked the exhaust up because they're the scab welding that they did for the cats and all that stuff was just not cool. Makes you want to cut all of it off and redo it. But it sounds good. It sounds all throaty. It sounds like a lot more than it is. One thing I want to do, and I haven't told my sons yet, I need to fix I'm going to put new O2 sensors in it, get rid of the code and all that, get it back so it's working right. Because I want to do the M90 test again. So I want to do it correctly. We want to put that little blower on, even if we're just running 5 pounds or whatever. I want to put that little blower on. But what I want to do is I'm going to put a nitrous shot on it. So I want to fix the O2 sensors. I want to come in because I want to take my kids for a ride. I want them to experience nitrous, and in the truck will be good because it won't hurt itself at all. So it'll be good. So every kid should feel, and it's unfortunately for them, it's not. They've seen all the Fast and Furious movies, so it's not going to be like that. But it is still as cool. You're very well informed. You do amazing testing, and that's informative. Surprised about the West Tech answer. How have you done so much testing? I've been doing stuff there for you. People don't realize it, but because the channel is relatively new. I mean, it's only 3 or 4 years old. But me doing the kind of testing that I've been doing is 30 years old. So I've been doing it for a long time. I just bought 2 76mm max speeding $125 turbos. Okay. So far they spin and make turbo noises at 5 pounds. That's a good start, right? I just make sure that I put oil in them before we start them up. And that seems to help. So Sean, your big disappointment, your takeaway from all that is that the Fiero is not airtight and that it can't actually go to space. I'm a fan of those movies. My problem is that even if you're going to do outlandish things, you need to do things that are realistic. Even in this artificial world that you've created, they have to be realistic. Like there's no reason to if you watch some movies where they like the Godzilla movies. Where I don't like when they destroy all of the city and everything. The Avengers are the same way. One of my favorite movies, I'm certain. But they destroyed most of New York. You got to save that from happening, because if you destroy trillions of dollars worth of a city, is that a success? Time capsule. So do you work? Yes, I do work. Has anybody seen the low-car classic look LS single plane intake with the electric throttle body and EFI on the dyno? Curious if on a 416 it could be, you could get a flatter torque curve. No, not if it's a single plane. The low car thing is just a single plane that they make look like a carbureted deal, right? It's going to do what single planes do. There. I have a 67 Camaro. Yes, you had me at 67 Camaro. Fairly new 327. I think I've been installing an Edelbrock E4 supercharger kit. I think that would be awesome. Rated for 500 horsepower, 5 pounds boost. Is this a good idea? Yes, it is. But the amount of power that you would make at some given boost level is going to be a function of the motor that you put it on. So if you put that supercharger making 5 pounds of boost on a, like, I think I'm trying to think, the lowest horsepower small block that I've ever run, like a 350, was 230 horsepower. So if you run 5 pounds on a 230 horsepower small block, it won't make 500. It has to be a good motor to begin with to make that power. And then I think that E4 supercharger will support more than 500, though. So if you have a good one, I mean, it's pretty easy on a small block like a 327 with decent heads on it and a camshaft to make between 300 and 350, let's say. And then when you add the blower on there, good things are going to happen. As far as car movies, Back to the Future is more realistic. At least you can find the part number for a flux capacitor. That's it. That was my coolest phone charger. It was a, you plug it in the cigarette lighter, but it was a flux capacitor, and then you plug your phone into that. What about LS ring metallurgy makes the rings not wear? It's a combination of what the ring is, because probably the factory small blocks, those are probably cast rings, I would imagine. And also what they make the block out of too, what the metallurgy is of the cylinders. Have you seen unequal fuel distribution in LS carbon tank manifolds? Yes, that's what we were just talking about. Both single plane and dual plane, and every one of them will be like that. It can't not, because if you look at the way that the intake is, every runner is not the same. One of my life goals is to pull up to an O'Reilly Auto Parts store in a DeLorean and ask for part number 121G. Is that the flux capacitor part number? Have you ever had worn out rings on an LS? I haven't. I mean, they wear, but not like they do. And I haven't done the math yet. Somebody's smart out there. I'll try to do it tonight. But what I wanted to do was figure out how much the rings would have to wear. Like what is the change in outside diameter what is the change on the ring between the outside diameter and inside diameter? So if it were all the way down to where it'd expand out, and whatever's just that little sliver that's left on the inside diameter of the ring, how much ring gap would we have? That should be a fairly easy math kind of thing. So if you have two engines that have the exact same cam, but one has 8.5 to 1 and one has 10 to 1, will the horsepower always be higher with the higher compression? Yeah, and at a rate of roughly 3 to 4% per 1 point of compression. Are you from Sacramento? I'm not. Thought I heard something about West Sac earlier in the chat. That might have been Todd. I'm in Northern California, but not in Sacramento. Partner 121G for 121 gigawatts. I didn't catch that. Wow, I'm slipping. Do single planes get better under boost? Do they get better what? They do the same thing under boost that they do NA. They have the same curve. So they tend to want to make power at a higher RPM range than a dual plane does. And they do that if you add a blower or a turbo to it. But also 1 pound of boost will give more power than 1 point of compression. Yeah, depending on where you're starting with. Usually a point of compression is like 12 or 15 horsepower, something like that. So if we look at 3 or 4% of 300 horsepower, it's like 12 horsepower, 9 to 12 horsepower. But a pound of boost on a 300 horsepower motor would be 15, would be 20. It's a real listing, and there's a disclaimer about plutonium not being available. What about unobtainium? So we're going to close out our poll at 92%. So that's a definite yes on the shirt and cam sale. Yep, the intake is the same as the wrong cam. They just do what they do. Their intake manifolds, in my opinion, are RPM specific. And they do that with boost. They do that with not boost. They do that with nitrous, all the same. I'm looking to build a twin turbo LM7 stock bottom end, looking for 800 horsepower. What computer and tuning platform would you suggest? I don't know. What I use a Holley or a Fast or a Haltech or a MS3 Pro, but you can make that easily with a stock ECU. And that's the reason my G10 is only 8.25 to 1, 93 octane limited street. And I think for like limited octane stuff, I definitely would do. I think compression like that's a good idea, especially if you can make so much more with the boost. And on that note, it is time to go. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.